Very cool. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us on a Wednesday evening. We have a short conversation scheduled ahead of us. Maybe as I explain the agenda, if you want to say hi in the comments, please feel free to pop your name if you want, or just where you're calling from in the comments. But so what we have slated for us today is a short conversation with Lindsey. I'll introduce her in a minute, and then we'll have some time for questions and hopefully a short conversation altogether. So maybe before I go into the details, very happy to have all of you here. I'm Martin, part of Dualoop, where I'm one of the partners there, and we're a small consulting firm based out of Brussels, where we do product management consulting, really around helping around product operating models, helping around trainings, and helping to bridge the gap in certain positions with placements of people. And today with me, I have Lindsey, who's a very good friend of mine. We've had the chance to work together for many years. She's more than a friend, she's also a mentor, and she's helped me navigate a lot of my thinking around product management, leadership, and especially career choices as well. So I'm very, very grateful to have her share a bit of how she thinks about product management and career, and how maybe one approach can inform the other and the other way around. So Lindsey,
yes, thank you very much, Martin, for that intro. Also, you are my mentor and colleague and friend, so very nice to join you today. I would really love if, folks who are dialing in today participate as much as they want to, and share some questions and comments as we go through. Like, we'll save lots of time for that as well in my chat with Martin. But let's get started. Can you see the slides? But yes. Okay. So why are we here today? We're talking about product management and managing your own career. Having a high risk tolerance is usually what I tell my clients, but I also have my limits. And I think even without the McKinsey training of running regular check-ins and networking with partners and your peers, et cetera, I have always thought about my career actively and managing it as I am my own product. And I always try to separate my career from the product organization or the product that we are building as well, just to make sure that I have a good touch with my own goals and what I need, both professionally and personally. So here you can see I have just started learning skiing just a few years ago. I'm looking down at a half pipe and these free ride skiers, but I am not going to do that. I know that I'm just trying to enjoy and keep up with my partner. But really, yeah, like taking risks day to day in the product choices that we make, that's really what we're used to as PMs and PM leaders. But we often don't have enough opportunity to think about what we are going to do next, whether that is a lateral movement, whether that is going into a startup or going into a consultancy. So we're at December 2025. It's a good time to talk about it now. You probably have finished your own professional reviews. Maybe you're running some personal retros with your significant others or your family. But also you're thinking about how AI is changing everyone's careers today. And we're in a digital product management world that is continuously emerging and changing. I see quite a few of my peers that are exiting McKinsey or moving around in Silicon Valley, considering different role titles, whether that is CTPO, we have thoughts on that, CIO or CTO, CRO, et cetera, in addition to CPO. So, how you approach those things, you can prepare quite a bit and have a business case for that. But I will give you one very simple visual today and just talk you through some mental models around that. So as I said, it'd be great to know where you are looking. When are you looking to make a change? Is that in the next 3 months? So you have a couple of things in the pipeline. You are probably looking maybe 6 months out, or this is something you're looking ahead in the next year or so. It'd be great if you can leave some comments. So again, hi, I'm Lindsey Nguyen. I'm currently based in Vienna, Austria. I'm currently a fractional product leader in a couple of different instances, as well as still working with startups and thinking about whether I will join the next thing and build again from scratch. I'm also really excited to see if I will find some really cool businesses that I would love to angel invest in. So that is still a thing that I'm pursuing on the side. In my professional career, I've been at McKinsey building a couple of different ventures with PE backing, just internal like FTSE investment and innovation. I had my own startup that was backed by Techstars. And, I really jumped into the software world as a QA intern with Apple and really leveraged that to become a full-time engineer there. And one of the things I want to share with you as well that's not on the page is some like personal tidbits. So I'm again an American in Austria. I'm a first generation American. I've held several other jobs that's not on my CV, which includes working in a restaurant and a secret dream of potentially opening a Vietnamese alpine hut. So bringing those things into like your worldview as well, that I am not just a professional. The other career stats that this talk has allowed me to really look at is that I've had 5 country moves, very used to picking things up and moving. McKinsey has given me the opportunity to move across multiple industries, various stages of businesses, from new ventures, as I've shared with you, as well as product org transformations. I've gone from being paid nothing as a fun, free consultant for my co-founder before we went into like equity and actually discussing salaries. My typical mean of staying in an organization is 4 years, 4.5. My average time in a role is about 18 months, and I'm constantly changing what my responsibilities are and picking things up in that time frame. I've oscillated back between IC and leadership roles. McKinsey really gave me a bunch of different opportunities in that. And my typical distance from loved ones is roughly a 2.5-hour flight for a long period of time to now to my family in the States, about 16 hours with a couple of different plane rides. As I looked back to share with you a little bit more of my story today, there were 3 different lenses that I applied for each horizon. Thank you for those who are putting in some inputs on when you're thinking about a change. And what I will do is share a little bit about that with my CV. So when I'm looking at a very specific change, my top 3 priorities professionally is what I'm learning, what the mission is, and typically the people and fit. In the next year or so, I'm really looking at how can I start demonstrating the next role, the skill sets that I need, how I'm currently performing against that already by looking at a few roles ahead of time. And in the future and like what I want to do, this is something I'm constantly brainstorming about with Martin and other mentors through my networks, thinking about, talking to different startups, different leaders about what opportunities they are hearing, and also just focusing on personally, like what my family is giving me as input, or my partner and I are discussing as we're maybe potentially considering another location. So in my career, I've had 5 career forks so far. Here are some of the typical things that you might have encountered when you're looking at your next role. Do I want to go to a fully software-based company, or what if there's some element of hardware there? Established tech versus going to pursue an education with an MBA. Leaving the MBA, I was looking at whether I join an established company where they were looking to transform their product op model, or start my own thing. Now, the next stage after that was consulting versus scale up. Some of the different opportunities that I could learn in consulting that I couldn't get in a scale up was the sheer number of repetition of different teams that you're forming, different industries that you get to see. Whereas in a scale up, you can own the portfolio for quite a long period of time and really take things through from your strategy to execution and sunsetting different aspects of your portfolio. And today I'm somewhere between an operator versus a leader. But when I made these choices, what went into that was really building a solid business case for myself behind that, modeling out what I needed in a salary in terms of equity, and actively talking to people about it around me, but as well as the hiring team or founder that I would be joining. And in my mind, I went into a role always with a clear hypothesis of what I wanted to achieve in terms of objectives and goals. So thanks for those of you who are looking. Most of you are looking to make a change perhaps in a year for your next role. That's good to know. So my next question for you, if you want to participate in the chat, is do you have an idea of a framework of which levers are important to you? Feel free to comment on the 5 that I have shared. So typically there are 3 professional and 2 personal levers that I think about. And in terms of professional, learning, mission, and fit are really big things that are important to me. Within learning, that's what's the topic, what's the craft skill that I'm looking to learn on my next dimensions. Is it a part of the leadership toolkit that I'm going to be able to flex and demonstrate as well as get new skills? In mission, to me, what does it look like as a customer? Why is that important to them that we are solving their problems? And then on top of that, it's what does the values mean behind it? How does the team operate? How are they making decisions? But does it resonate with my own personal values? And in terms of fit, it's all about the people, peers, the leadership team, the board, the team that I'm working with and getting to grow and develop. When I'm looking at that, are we all bringing a diversity of thought? Is there creativity? Are they inspiring me? And also, when we are approaching a challenge, do I feel like this team member or my peer or leadership team will challenge me back and at the same time be able to voice their own, challenges or critiques of my ideas? I think that's really important for me, that you have this obligation to dissent in McKinsey, but in a very transparent way, be able to talk about the frameworks in which we evaluate things or the data and facts that we have and try to move forward and make decisions. The other 2 dimensions or levers that I have indicated here, typically for me, that's important and growing more important, are location and well-being. One thing I would note is that I'm managing a chronic condition called endometriosis. So for me, health has gotten to be a bigger and bigger dimension that I consider. And a lot of that means, do I have some flexibility to be able to manage this with different appointments, et cetera? But earlier on in my career, well-being included being able to pay my student loan debt or being able to travel to different places that I was interested in. So these dimensions flex a little bit and you can create your own scorecard. But in order to get to a nice little visual, you have to do some business case development, talk to people in the business, and see how you start to score that for yourself. So again, these are my 5, but I would love to hear if you had any sort of dimension that you think I should add or remove, or how that would change for you. So if you were talking about making a change in the next 3 months, hopefully you have done quite a few interviews and you're able to think about the dimensions and start to qualify that. What works really well is that you treat these interviews as a 2-way street. I'm not going to talk about the first 2 that I will show you, but you can see as we move from my choice between becoming a QA engineer at Apple or going into a hardware team, i.e., building nuclear submarines, that it was really hard for me to evaluate some of the location aspects because it was on different coasts. But I was very excited about being in California versus in Groton, Connecticut, and really excited to learn and see how software is developed at Apple in a path to production in 1 year versus building and working on a propulsion system that will only ship in 10 years. We'll skip over this one and we'll go really into, now, I'm not sure where you're looking to move in the next 3 months, but one of the hardest decisions for me was looking at coming from earning nothing. Yes, I invested in myself for my MBA, to what is going to be the next role after my MBA that will bring me to where I want to be in my career, which is transitioning from being at the end of a process in the software development process of testing, making sure that software works, to more in the beginning of strategy. So building up my product toolkit and really start to understand like the access to customers, how we can start to input their feedback to us earlier on versus later on in measuring pixels, et cetera. So as a co-founder, I really saw that this was a great opportunity for learning and mission. The fit I was a little bit unsure about. While my co-founder and I took one overlapping executive course together, and he had great peer reviews, I didn't really know him that well, but what worked really well for us was that I gave him the offer that I had from the other business. And we were able to come to a discussion about, hey, what are the things that mean success for him and what it is that means success for me. So I shared with him that I would only do this if he could match my current salary that I was being offered, as well as like, this is the equity that we would be aiming for me, because this is what we believe the valuation. And we could have a conversation about that, like as we go along, etc. But what I really wanted to get out of it aligned with what he wanted to do in his perspective, which is we wanted within a year to be able to raise a seed round and be able to acquire 5 key customers and build a proper engineering team. All of those things we could work together on, and I could really steer and lead. For me, I was not an expert in wastewater management, but I really thought that there were great opportunities within government and within the regulation space to bring really simple UI and technology to a space that was well deserved to look after our environment. And so I resonated with the mission, and I really believed in my co-founder, and the fact that we had these great transparent conversations about what I wanted to learn and where my gaps were. That was really what pushed this decision over for me. In terms of enroll, some of you are looking to make a change in the next 6 to 9 months. What I would advise you to do is think about, what are you measuring yourself against already in the next role? How are you already presenting those key skill sets? So while I'm thinking about the next opportunity, McKinsey really allowed me to see that in the next engagements and the next conversations I had with different partners that I was interested in working in. What we would always share as a consultant and recommended to share is, here are my review feedback areas of growth. This is what I've been actively working on. And please go and talk to Martin or someone else on my team about how I've been developing that. Getting this constant feedback really helped crystallize what the learning aspect was. And McKinsey for me was a great fit on that, where I would always find really smart people that I believed we could have difficult conversations to make a better product, to really understand the customer. So in the next role, what are those markers that will grow and stretch you, and really try to understand what are you optimizing for in your next project or the next 3 months of what you're shipping, so that you can have these active stories that you can tell in interviews and already showcase that you are able to exercise those skills that your next role is looking for. And longer term view that I was going to share really quickly is the fact that, you know, in an operator versus a leader worldview, you often will, as a PM, move away from craft to looking at building systems. And in this worldview of like making this change in the longer term, it's networking a little bit more around, will that resonate with me? How am I already building systems? And what does people management actually look like? And I think that I spent a lot of time here with my mentors to discuss, you know, what aspects of leadership resonated with me? How does that fit with what I want to learn? And how does that really match up to the missions and things that I care about, my values? I think one of the things that are a big struggle when you are moving into a leadership position is the fact that it can be quite a struggle to balance your well-being, because it can take a lot more of your brain space. There's also a lot of coaching and thinking about how you develop other folks. So also asking for resources to help bring you to that leadership aspect, i.e. coaching, being part of different peer groups outside of your organization so that you can share different techniques are really helpful. I think the last thing I would really remind you to think about nowadays is the fact that, you know, work-life balance is quite challenging. There's an article, I believe, on Monday in entrepreneur.com of Harley Finkelstein really discussing how it's not work-life balance that we should be aiming for, i.e. like weighing things on a scale, but a search for harmonization. And the article goes on to also quote Satya Nadella and Jeff Bezos talking about how, you know, if it's something you're really passionate about, you're not going to just compartmentalize and not think about it all the time. You should try to have like healthy, you know, breaks from thinking about work or a big problem, but you should also figure out, you know, is there time for me to go out for a walk with my husband right now? It's Wednesday evening. We don't need to, you know, continue working on our laptops. Or, you know, maybe it is a Saturday conversation with Martin about my great idea. And that's a bit of a holistic push for that. So in summary, I really hope that sharing a little bit of the three lenses of using your network, thinking about your next role, and opening more two-way doors will help you take your next risk. The big point I have that I've learned is that you need to make time for your own personal retro. If you don't take a break to say, hey, I've been running at 100 miles an hour and these are the things that are working and these are the things that I need to change and these are my non-negotiables, you're not going to be able to place a career that you are really happy with. Some of the things that you should think about, and there was a McKinsey article that discussed this, is understanding what is your motivation for your next move. Is it money, which is totally valid, like I said at the beginning? Is it achievement that you're looking for, i.e., you know, specific craft building, or is it security? That's where you know you have this job, it is really helping you balance everything else out, or is it meaning or recognition? You know, where I am at today, meaning is the biggest factor, but all the other things were true at different stages of your career. The second thing is take a step forward to open more two-way doors. I think if you are sitting and looking at, I don't know how to make this decision, please call somebody, please network with somebody in the organization, use your connection to myself now from this call, or your connection to Martin to think about, how can I get a little bit more data points, but how do I then just really quickly put it into a quick matrix scorecard, and then really say, this is what I think it looks like visually for me, and talk to your family member or some other mentors about it to make sure that, this does make sense. The last thing I would say is, again, that already highlights what you could do to make a more resilient career, is that I'm now working on my own, but my network and helping others have really opened more doors for me, and the warm intros are the best thing. With so many bots out there now that are combing through your CV, and you can leverage ChatGPT to make the best CV, I think talking to other people, knowing what is going on, and sharing with them what you have accomplished is the best way to look for something as the next thing. I've opened many more doors with my McKinsey peers, my peers from Techstars, that say, hey, Lindsey, we think you could help in this area. Or I've also recommended folks into a space to be able to, help move the organization along, because I'm not the right fit, but I ended up knowing someone for that. So I think that pretty much wraps up my chat about what I thought about in my career, what you could do in terms of right now, if you're weighing up a position against another, or staying or leaving. The other thing of, if you're just thinking about evaluating yourself right now, or in the future, start planting seeds. That's what I would say. Hey, Martin.
Hello. Thank you very much. As obviously have a few questions for Lindsey. Also want to recap a couple of things that I've learned from this. As I do that, can you please ask any comments or questions that you have in the comments section? Very happy to feed them into the conversation. But so thanks, Lindsey. There's a couple of points that came back to me, which, we've spoken about before, but I want to highlight again. Maybe the first one I'm going to start with is this thing that was told to me very early in my career, which was like, manage your energy and not your time, which I relate a lot to this quest of harmony that you were talking about at the end. To me, that's one way that's worked for me, which means I tend to be okay working on Sunday evening, because I prefer knowing that my Monday might be a bit lighter. I know that works for me, but that helps me find balance. Not saying it's the best practice for everyone, right? It's just what works for me. I have a bunch of questions. Right? I really, well, you know me, I like the fact that you came up with a series of criteria to assess the different moves and the framework to do that. It's not the RISE framework, but it is very, very applicable. The first one I'm going to have is, in your framework, there were 5 dimensions. None of them was directly related to money, right? And so how do you balance the business case, the money and the requirements that you have, with the fit on the levers that you had?
Yeah, I would say, okay, I mentioned at the start, like, first generation, I am very used to working like an hourly wage, and saving money and trying to figure out, what is my actual budget and what am I aspiring for the future. My husband would say that I'm not great at that, but I'd like to think that I am. But I think money fits into for me, like, under well-being. And I would say I do a quick back of the envelope exercise. Again, like, what are my current expenses? And I model that out. And I also have an oh shit fund. And I figure out what that runway is. And related to a question that was asked in the chat as well, like, in case it doesn't work, I know I will give myself 6 months in role. Or 6 months after that, like, I can quit today and spend 6 months and try to find my next role and figure something out. So for me, like, number one is, what are you comfortable with as your safety net? Like, have you built a safety net? If not, you should think about what that looks like. Once you have done that, then, you always keep an eye on that runway. And then I know that some people I've spoken to have been in a role, and they have to stay in that role because, that's what's keeping their own household lights on. And it's really hard to look in that pressurized situation. And I can sympathize. I can't exactly empathize all through, but I think one of the things is like, if you can start to build a small safety net, then when you're actively looking and networking, that can help you really, figure out what that right, um, that right next role is. If you're specifically talking about how do you think about equity and salary, I think for me, like in the comparison that I had between joining my startup versus joining a digital scale up, I knew that that provided both security and market rate salary at that time in Ireland. I asked my co-founder to match that market rate salary, which was, by the way, like more than a 20% pay cut from Silicon Valley, that what I was already earning. So because I've already taken one step of risk to say, invest in my career making nothing, I knew that if I wanted to stay in Ireland, that the expectation of making a Silicon Valley salary in Ireland is not the right one. So I had to reset and say, okay, my expenses are different in California than it is in Dublin. So we also have to recalculate that in terms of budgeting. And then on the equity factor, you do your own homework, right? So you're all aiming for a specific valuation. What data set are you using for that? How confident are you in the salesperson or the CEO? And also, like, have you spoken with the customers? Like, I always ask that to you, right, Martin? Like, what are they like? Have you spoken to them? So if you believe that there's something real there, I think that adds to, once you've done to your own research, that adds to, then how much time do you need to earn that equity? It's usually, a 1-year cliff, 4-year investment. And then, you can then do that calculation again and say, okay, I think minimum amount of time I'm going to spend here is 18 months. And will I stay here? If I stay here any longer, that means I have achieved my goals and I've reset my goals. And that adds into the finance aspect for me. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, thank you. And how do you have tips and tricks as to how you prototype and try to test against these different levers? I see Jason asked in the comments as well, like maybe are you open to share moments where it may not have turned out to be as true or as well assessed as you thought it would be before you took the role?
Yes. I mean, you always have regrets. I think that I haven't left a role, like, joined a company and then left a role. But within McKinsey, I have joined teams and immediately left teams. So that is like, I do see that each engagement or team that I've worked with as its own separate business, because we do, build a very strong culture within each team. And then you might you might not resonate. And at that time, I think the levers were much smaller. So the conversation I had with my leader, the engagement manager at the time, was that you can only choose 2 out of 3 things whenever you're looking at the next McKinsey engagement. And that was, people, topic, or location. And you might not have a choice. And sometimes I've spoken to some of our colleagues that none of those 3 things were their choice. They were just force staffed. I've luckily haven't been done that, but I have been presented it as like this, or you have nothing else. So in a way, like being staffed or being on a project and working in a scale up at that time in finance in Dubai, it was not a great time for me. And I think that my evaluation was like, hey, as long as the people that I'm working with, I know, and I did a proper due diligence on, I interviewed them, that would be fine. And the leader that I was working with, he was there. I thought that this would be a great environment for me because he would know where my strengths are, be able to continue coaching me. Location, I was flexible about being in the Middle East, and the topic was somewhat helping me stretch, right? Like it was a lot more on the go to market side, and I really enjoyed that. So, people and topic, location, I was like, meh, I guess I can't choose that. I can't be based in London forever. But I didn't realize how quickly that would implode on me, that a team that you think you're joining actually completely changes shape when you finally get there. And that, I understand, is also happening, and I see that happening to teams now. Because of AI, there's lots of shift in finding engineers with experience, designers with experience in that space, and teams are constantly shifting. And so it feels like you're joining, the team that you interviewed is not the team that you're actually joining. And I think that was really like hard to spot. And that what ended up in burnout and exhaustion. The client was very happy. Like the customers, we were gaining some traction, but it was a lot of extra work that didn't need to happen. And I would say that was not a great time. And even though you can do the homework to evaluate like what the team would be like, I think I missed asking some questions, right? I think my question was, how long are you committed to this project? What is the plan for the team to also grow for this new strategy? Now I have some additional questions that I will ask when I'm looking at making a change or looking at a team that I would be joining.
Yeah, and so maybe on the people point, because it's such a hard one. How do you assess? How do you get a feel of these people are the right ones that I want to work with?
Ooh, yeah. I mean, so in that, I'm always looking for someone who is smarter and more passionate than I am, because I vibe off of that energy. And I think part of the reason that I enjoy working with people that are super passionate is because I get to learn more about a particular aspect of their craft. So that's something that I always like to figure out and ask. Um, I think that you can get that sense from how they describe something that they're super proud of, or like how they work through a problem. So asking, hey, was there something that you was really disappointed in sunsetting, or how did you approach some of the difficult conversations? Like, what is it like to work with Martin when he's really stressed? He's never really stressed. I think that's a big hint. But like, what is it like in stressful environments with Martin? And so some of the things you can ask other people what a leader is like to work with, as well as asking them and trying to check like how self-aware they are. That's my biggest thing. And then I also ask like, hey, I wonder what you're learning to do next. Like, how are you expecting to grow? Here's what I think I bring to this role, and I think I'm growing on XYZ dimensions. Like, what about you? And I always try to look at the interview as a two-way street. And when I'm hiring people onto my team, that's also what I expect as well. So sometimes when I get no questions, that's also like a negative for me, because it's like, well, I think we need to figure out if this fits or not.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think the aspect of, maybe to add, one thing that I do is the aspect of due diligence is important in asking about other people that have worked with the people you're going to work with, and to get their perspective on the collaboration. really helps. Maybe one last question from me, and then I'm curious to hear if we have more questions in the chat. But the last one is, and I realize it's a bit of a different question because I know you haven't done it, but how do you think, or how would you think about when it's time to move, right, and to leave? Because career choices and career moves are basically a moment in time where you decide, I want to find something new. How do you approach that reflection?
Yeah. Sometimes people know it before you know it. Like, I'm still very close with my co-founder at Swift Comply. So Mick and I chat, and occasionally when I'm struggling, I will give him a call too. But basically, he shared with me when I was finally ready to tell him, and I think it took me like 3 weeks to figure out what I was going to say to him. But I had this inkling feeling, I think, for a few months, right? But I had made the decision, I will talk to him about it, that I was going to start actively interviewing. I put my CV out there, and now I've gotten a bunch of interviews lined up. Basically, we had this conversation, and he already knew, because he was like, Lindsey, you were very explicit at the front when you negotiated with me what our objectives and key results were and what you wanted to be in charge of. And I knew that as you started ticking those off and we started taking things off together, that you would be bored or you would want the next thing. And so I think it goes to the point of networking and checking in with your network as well. But basically, we've had such transparent and open conversations about it that he knew before I did. But I also had these conversations with people outside of my, outside of, Silicon Valley. Oh, sorry, outside of like the software world that we were living in Dublin, and saying, hey, this is what I've been doing. I also don't want to be in Dublin anymore. Like, does that make sense? And they were like, yeah, like you also told us when you were leaving California that this is what you wanted to accomplish. So it is time to go. So I had that feeling, and I think that I had such a strong tie to working with my co-founder and his, evolving mission now that we've accomplished mission one, like he was on to the next bucket, that I wasn't part of that. I didn't want to be part of that. Whilst I am happy to be a cheerleader, I didn't want to be actively building that aspect or scaling it. So yeah, I think when you're thinking about a career move, it's like reflect back to the beginning when you joined. What was the excitement about? Why did you want to, be there? And what were some of the things you thought, success looked like? If you've ticked those things off, then it's the question for me is there more that you can do that will keep you excited? Is there anything else, laterally or other projects that you would be excited to lead? Are there other things outside of your life that maybe security is what you need and you need to focus on your personal life, working on your health, picking up a new hobby? I don't know what it is, but things outside of work is also important. So sometimes, I'm really advocating that you just push that security is also okay for a short period of time. But if you're super ambitious, it's, working through that list. If you've accomplished the things you initially accomplished, is there more that this organization can provide to you? Or is there something else out there? And just start talking to people out there, because it may look like the grass is greener on the outside. But if you do the DD, then maybe it's not, right? So like that's also the next thing that I would do.
Cool. Thank you very much. I'll maybe give 2 more seconds for people to ask any closing comments.
And I was wondering if I answered Jason's question, so let me just reread it. About what did not work well. Yeah, people, I would say, is quite difficult to evaluate during a career shift. Any blind spots? So I think one of the things around blind spots or trying to get as much input as you can is that if you're joining a leadership team as a CXO or a VP, if you can, ask for the data on their customers, ask for, what the strategy looks like and the thought process, ask to meet the board. I think these are really important things for you to understand, like how, what was how your peers are thinking, but also how the board will be evaluating you, because sometimes you don't get to change the strategy. You are joining a strategy, so you really need to understand like whether that is the right thing for you. And yeah, so ask for as much information as you need to make the decision. And if they're not willing to share the information, like, in a PDF, then ask for more time to speak to them so that you can really understand your next role, because that can be tricky. And if you don't know who's going to be joining the team, like really do just ask what that is and how you would be involved in the process.
Yeah, I think it goes back to due diligence is a really hard thing. And trusting data over opinions, which is another good skill of product management, is important too.
Yeah, for me, I feel like most PMs, as I said at the beginning, is the fact that you're very good at making risky choices day to day in your product or in the product organization. But if you're constantly spending 110% of your time within the organization and not on yourself, then it will feel hard to make the next step.
We have one more question. Sorry, I didn't hear your introduction. Would you consider becoming, and I have something like a Grammarly thing in front.
Oh, no problem. I can read it. The question is, would I consider becoming a founder myself? Yes, I would, again. So before my McKinsey life, I was running my own business with my co-founder. Would I consider becoming a founder again? Yes, I am actively talking to some potential co-founders right now about the idea and how I could add to it and what it would mean for us to be a team. Yeah. And Samuel, if you want to add a second follow-up question, happy to answer that. I think for me, taking the risk of being a founder, again, like I have a very clear idea of what my own personal runway is. And the question I asked to these co-founders that we are discussing tomorrow is more what their aspirations are and what they're looking to achieve in the next 3, 6, 9 months, because that's roughly the runway that we have. Yeah, of course.
All right. I think we can close here. Thank you very much, Lindsey, for your expertise and you sharing your journey with us. It was really inspiring and insightful. For everyone else, I wish you all already probably a happy new year, even if it might be a bit of a sin to say it so early. And we'll see you for the next event somewhere in January. Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.